call these. The Committee on Military Veterans and Homeland Security will come to order. We are going to go at ease for a moment. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, will you? Oh, welcome back to order. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Chair Conley.
Present.
Representatives Coleman.
Here.
T. Carter.
Present.
Stone.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Wegla.
Here.
Markinen. Azad.
Present.
Martin. Here. St. Germain.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 9 members present, a quorum.
Representative St. Germain moves to adopt the minutes from the May 16, 2023 meeting. Seeing no objections, the meeting minutes are approved. So today we continue with the second of our two-part series of hearings on veterans' mental health. The focus of this latter hearing is current and future efforts to address the issue. Joining us, we have Representative Felicia Brayback, and with us, members from Reason for Hope, as well as University of Michigan Medicine, and representatives from the Michigan Departments of Military and Veterans Affairs and Health and Human Services. Thank you all for being here today. I'm very excited to hear your testimony on what solutions are available and what the future holds with respect to tackling veterans' mental health in our state. I would like to first welcome Representative Felicia Brayback, who will be speaking to the role of traditional clinical therapy. Representative, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, thanks for having me here today. I'm really honored to be able to talk with you about veterans and mental health care issues. As a clinical psychologist and a social worker who's been able to practice now for almost 3 decades, I truly am honored to be able to talk about this particular issue with all of you. And although the veteran population is not one that I specialize, we as mental health care practitioners, particularly generalists, are trained to be able to work with everyone. And so this is something that I have done, and I'm happy to be able to share some of my knowledge. As we heard last week, death by suicide is a huge issue for our veterans. Rates of death by suicide, they range. We heard last week that it might be about 24 veterans, but there is a study from 2022 that when you take into account self-harm behavior, that number may be up to 44 veterans a day. 44. Brown University, they released a study in 2021 that found that veterans who served in post-9/11 conflicts more died by suicide than in combat. 30,177 veterans died by suicide, compared to 7 in combat. The loss of humanity is startling. It's stark. And it speaks to our continued need for mental health care services for our veterans. In fact, I receive unsolicited requests. I get postcards and letters in the mail. For years I've gotten these, asking me to move across the country to be able to serve our veterans. And I just think that that speaks volumes every time I get one of those letters. I think about how urgent and great the need is. So in preparing to testify before you all today, I spoke with an administrator at the Ann Arbor VA, and his insights were really, really helpful. He reported that in general, veterans have more substance use issues than the general population. He also stated that it's well documented that individuals who serve our country in the armed forces are more likely to come from some troubled backgrounds. He said, and that all adds then to when our veterans return home and start to reacclimate, that adds to mental health care issues. He added that the issue of death by suicide for veterans is a major focus for the VA. Last week, Rep. Rogers and others asked about solutions. And so that was one of the things that I talked with him about. And there's something that I hadn't heard talked about last week, and I'm not sure if you all talked about yet, but it's called the Compact Act of 2023. And what it allows is for former members of the armed forces to be able to receive crisis services at the VA or non-VA healthcare facilities at no cost. So this includes inpatient treatment for up to 30 days and outpatient services for up to 90 days. In fact, this article from the VA News that I was reading about the Compact Act said that this expansion of care will help prevent veteran suicide by guaranteeing no-cost, world-class care to veterans in times of crisis. It will also increase access to acute suicidal care for up to 9 million veterans who are currently not enrolled in the VA. 9 million additional veterans who we could reach through this act. Additionally, my contact at the VA said that they're also starting to do mental health care screenings more regularly, once or twice a year, on everyone who walks through the doors at the VA. And then what they're doing, if that screening then indicates that there are some mental health care issues, they're doing a warm handoff between the medical practitioner and the mental health care practitioner to ensure continuity of care and continued care. In terms of issues that we can see with our veterans, although they, it can be the typical kind of array, there is an increase that we see in depression and anxiety and PTSD and combat-related guilt. And these are all particularly challenging and complicated. Additionally, I got to speak with family members of veterans who talked about that transition to civilian life after combat. Dean spoke about this last week with all of you, and one of the gentlemen who I spoke with, he talked about his stepson. And his stepson died by suicide the day after Thanksgiving last year. And he stated that although his stepson was honorably discharged a decade before, right, he continued to struggle with the issues of reacclimating. He distanced himself from their family, and his mental health care needs were great, but he struggled to get services and to resolve those issues. And all of these things, point to, and unfortunately, that isn't a unique situation. And again, one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to all of you for specifically looking at this issue. We need to continue to put resources into mental health care for our veterans. We need to continue to allocate resources to recruiting and retaining mental health care workers to be able to work with our veterans. And we must work with our federal and our local partners to ensure that our veterans who have made an incredible sacrifice for each one of us, that they are able to get the help that they need when they return. We need to ensure that that help is easily accessible and unencumbered by bureaucracy. Madam Chair, I want to say thank you again for allowing me to testify. I'm really grateful, as I've mentioned a couple of times, that you've chosen to focus on this important issue. It needs our continued and persistent attention. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Representative Brayback. And I know you're working hard to retain and recruit mental health care workers, which is another big issue around this.
That's right.
Does anyone have any questions? Representative Bizot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Brayback, thank you for all your hard work. This is a very important issue, and I applaud you for taking this up. Vietnam veterans, when we came home, there was zero counseling,
right.
zero everything. We were in one day and out the next. So I think Vietnam veterans have a tendency just to say, okay, we're fortunate enough to make it home. There's many, 58,400 and plus that didn't make it. So we're fortunate enough, but they're dealing with PTSD for many, many years.
Right.
So the 22, now you're saying it could be as high as 44. That's a real number, and I applaud you and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Representative Bizot. It was interesting when I was, again, talking with my contact and colleague at the VA. One of the things that we were talking about was longitudinally, he has really seen that World War II and Vietnam veterans, it's their access to mental health care is really different than those post that. And he was really talking about the stark difference. And positing that it could be because of lack of services available at the time, but also wondering if there are some generational impacts in terms of stigma and wanting to be able to get access to care. One of the things that we know about the more recent generations is that there is more of a willingness, but there's also more access as well. But that is absolutely true. Yeah.
Representative Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Rep. Bizot, because that made me think my grandfather talking about coming back from World War II and being on a ship with his brothers in arms for 2 weeks was a big transition, right? So,
Right.
And then hearing you talk about walking off, out of a war situation, walking on an airplane and walking back into civilian experience, are there any of these transitional periods? What does that look like for veterans coming home?
That's a great question. I would have to do some more research to find out. And one of the things that we heard from Dean, last week was that, 10 days after being in combat, he was home playing euchre, right? That's not, that's such a short amount of time. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around how you even make sense of that adjustment. And so I do think that some attention being paid to what time and support is there right after discharge for folks as they're coming back and returning.
Okay, thank you, Representative Brayback, for your testimony today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we are going to have testimony first from a doctor at the University at Michigan Medicine, I should say, and then a team from Reason for Hope. And what you will be hearing is testimony on the burgeoning field of psychedelic medicine as a treatment option. I would like to make it very clear that this conversation will not be touching on the topic of legalization, but rather the ways in which psychedelics under a controlled setting have proven beneficial to some veterans, and the hope that it may hold in the future as it is better applied and studied. And first up is our doctor from Michigan Medicine, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. You have the floor.
Thank you.
Oh, there you are.
Is everybody able to hear me? Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Avinash Hosanagar. I'm an associate professor at the University of Michigan Hospital, and I'm a staff psychiatrist at the VA hospital. And I provide ketamine and other treatments for patients with treatment-resistant depression here at the VA, and I am part of the Michigan Psychedelic Center, where we are looking at carrying out studies with psychedelic compounds for treatment of mental health conditions and various other disorders at the University of Michigan. Just to give you a brief background, psychedelic compounds traditionally uh, were also known as hallucinogens, and they mainly we think about magic mushrooms, which contain psilocybin and MDMA, also known as ecstasy. Other compounds like LSD, which are being studied in Europe, are also belong to the same group, though there are not many clinical studies going on that in this country. And finally, what many consider as a non-classic psychedelic, which is ketamine, which is an anesthetic agent, which has been used for treatment of mental health conditions, mainly depression, in the last 2 decades or so. So these are compounds that uh, have had a lot of interest because of new science that is showing that these compounds may be useful for treatment of certain mental health conditions. And these compounds may work well for patients who may not respond to traditional mental health treatments with depression and therapy. And in those group of patients too, that these compounds have shown to have profound effects. These studies were initially carried out in the 50s and 60s, but they were subsequently banned, and they were categorized as a Schedule 1 compound. And so there was, for nearly 3 to 4 decades, no research carried on until the beginning of early 2000s, when some of the research studies began with psychedelic compounds. And from there on, we've been able to carry out studies in the field with psychedelics, with psilocybin mainly, for depression, and MDMA for PTSD. And these studies have been carried out in small sample sizes, by which I mean very small number of patients, in what we call as phase 2 studies. And these phase 2 studies have shown really promising results in certain group of patients, that these patients respond well to treatment. And there is a phase 3 study for MDMA, which is one of the largest studies with these compounds, that was carried on by the organization known as MAPS. And they found that these compounds, again, have shown response for patients with PTSD, which, again, both depression and PTSD are common conditions suffered by many of our veterans, and many of whom do not find adequate response with traditional therapies. Now, this is not to say that the traditional therapies don't work. Traditional therapies do work, both with medications and therapy. But some of the veterans are not able to respond to those treatments, and therefore are in need for other treatments. Currently, ketamine is available clinically for use in a off-label format. That is, this is not an FDA-approved treatment. S-ketamine, which is a compound derived from ketamine, is FDA approved, and that's the only approved treatment that's available currently for treatment of depression. It is not available for treatment of PTSD. And the process of carrying out a research study with these compounds can be quite daunting. It requires several steps of approval, which includes a DEA Schedule 1 license, which, as you can imagine, is very challenging to get. And after which we carefully screen patients, make sure they are appropriate and do not have any contraindication. The studies then are carried out in a very safe, controlled therapeutic environment under the supervision of trained clinical staff. There's usually a preparation phase, followed by the treatment phase, and then an integration phase where the experience is processed. They make meaning of that treatment, and then undergo a series of psychotherapy sessions to help them with their treatment for their mental health conditions. So as you can imagine, this involves a lot of commitment from the patient and resources for us to be able to provide good clinical care with these compounds. These compounds carry a lot of risk. They can cause hallucinations. They can cause intense anxiety. They can increase blood pressure. They can increase heart rate. And so they have to be carefully monitored. People do experiment with these compounds on their own, and often when done outside of the clinical settings, people experience a lot of side effects, which result in many ER visits and adverse reactions. And so studies clearly show that these have to be done in a very careful, have to be done very carefully and in a closely monitored environment. There's early there are early results showing a lot of promise, but a lot more needs to happen in terms of research. Currently, there's not a whole lot of funding available for these studies, and there is a big need for additional, funding from federal at state level, along with the need for working towards getting these compounds more readily available for research at this point so that we better understand these compounds and see if they can be utilized more on a clinical basis. That is all I have to say at this point, but Dr. Grau is my colleague from University of Michigan who specializes in the treatment of PTSD, is also available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I would like to ask the first question, which is, at what point would you decide someone's traditional therapy isn't working and move them toward this? Is it sort of years in the making, or, at what point would you say somebody would be more eligible to try this?
So it depends on the trial. Some of the clinical trials are meant for treatment-resistant conditions, which usually means trial of at least 2 to 3 medications and a psychotherapy option. Typically, these options, a trial of these medications, usually each of those trials will take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So typically, a patient would get into these kind of trials after a year or two of their, treatment journey. Sometimes these trials are meant for directly for without any indication for a treatment resistance. In those instances, people are eligible to participate in the study as long as they meet the condition for having, for as long as they meet the criteria for having that disease or condition.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for questions now. Representative Stone.
Thank you. So these are in trials. How widely accessible are they?
So currently, here in the state of Michigan, we have no trials that are ongoing. At the University of Michigan, we do have, we are due to launch a couple of trials this year. Once they are available, once the trials are open, they will be available to people here in Michigan. But otherwise, I don't know of any other clinical trials that are ongoing in the state of Michigan. Some of the other trials are being carried out at other larger academic centers like in New York or Yale or on the West Coast, at Stanford and other medical centers. Only a couple of VAs on the West Coast have these trials ongoing at this point. So there's very limited access to these clinical trials at this point. There are basic science studies going on, but those are not meant for patients. And so the access is quite limited at this time.
Can I ask a follow-up? How widely accessible are these for veterans, and how much are they tailored to the general public?
Well, so these studies are meant generally at this point in time meant for general public, but a veteran who meets those conditions can participate in those studies, but these are not designed or have not been carried out here in Michigan for veterans. Like I said, There are a couple of trials being carried out for veterans, but they are out in the West Coast. And so there's another trial that is going to begin in Columbus for veterans. And so our veterans here in the state of Michigan are eligible to participate in that trial. I know the principal investigator of that trial. And if we have veterans who seem appropriate for that trial, we will be referring them to that trial as well.
Representative Wigella.
Thank you for your testimony. I think this is a really important topic of conversation, as at least my understanding, the evidence is mounting that entheogenic medicines are really effective at treating mental health. Just curious, from my knowledge, there's only 2 states in the United States that have made the use of these types of medicines legal for medical use, which is Colorado and Oregon. My question to you is, have we seen positive results in those states doing that, any negative results? And would you advocate that Michigan should follow in that suit in legalizing entheogenic medicine for for these purposes?
Right. So at this point, these compounds, so the states that have legalized them have not made it, like Oregon has not made it available to public yet, to the point that public can actually access it in a medicinal form, because these states are still kind of deciding how exactly do we make it available. So some of those processes are still being worked out. We don't have good data to say if it is working or not at this point in time. So I don't have much to kind of go by to provide information on that, except that it is legalized in those states, and their goal is to make it available. Their goal is to make it available in a carefully controlled environment where patients or the general public can go get themselves screened to see if they meet criteria, and they would be able to get the medicine in a clinic, so to say. But the details are missing at this point, and so I'm sorry, I don't have much more to add to that at this current time.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. My question is a little bit different, but similar vein. I introduced a resolution last year, House Resolution 330, about hyperbaric oxygen therapy for depression, PTSD, and brain injury. And I was just curious if that is being done at your facility. I know there's several institutions that are doing trials on that, and just wondered, it's similar but different, obviously not a drug, but oxygen therapy, just like we use hyperbaric oxygen therapy to treat traditional wounds.
So I know of some studies being carried out elsewhere, but I do not know of any studies being carried out at the University of Michigan at this point. And this is not an area that I'm very familiar with, so it's beyond my expertise to really comment on that, unfortunately.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, very much for your testimony, and thanks to Michigan Medicine for lending you to us for today. Next up, we're going to have a team from Reason for Hope. I'll tell you about the organization and look forward to your testimony. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your invitation to appear before you today. My name is Jesse McLaughlin, and I represent Reason for Hope and the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition. And I'd also like to thank the members of the committee for your advocacy and your work. The hearing last week was incredibly moving, and we want to thank you for the time and attention you're putting to this incredibly important subject. We're here today to tell a story of triumph and tragedy. The triumph being the incredibly promising data coming out of the nation and some of the world's most preeminent mental health research institutions on the efficacy of psychedelic medicine when offered in safe, controlled medical settings. to ending PTSD and depression at rates we've never seen before. The data has been so encouraging that the FDA recently granted MDMA and psilocybin its coveted breakthrough therapy status on behalf of incredibly promising data. MDMA is showing efficacy rates of 67% at ending PTSD. We haven't seen anything like this. And so there's great promise. The tragedy, though, is that the funding sources for psychedelic medicine, its proliferation, have been limited to venture capital and philanthropy. Our state and federal governments have yet to step in to help accelerate the deployment of this medicine. And veterans in this country can't afford to wait. We know that hundreds of veterans every year are traveling to countries in Central and South America to receive psychedelic medicine. And we really have two questions. Why is it that we are forcing American veterans who served their country to leave the United States of America to get the care that they need? Number one. And number two, who will be their champion to accelerate the deployment of safe, accessible, and affordable psychedelic medicine here in the United States?
Well said. Madam Chair, nice to see you again. Thank you all for having me. My name is Tommy Aceto. I am a Michigan native. I left this great state after I graduated college in 2003 from Elma College. I grew up on Lake St. Clair and never thought my life would take me here. To be back here to tell you all what it's doing is something that you might not even believe me if I told you. I found myself in psychedelic medicine after a 16-year career as a Navy SEAL. I was a medic and an intelligence guy. Lost a lot of friends. Saw quite a bit of blood. And, you know, the thing that I've learned after healing from PTS and all of my addictions are gone. That's not something that psychedelics did for me. That's something that psychedelics allowed me to do for myself. Psychedelic medicine, when used with intention, is a key, a tool that we can heal ourselves with. And it's the first step in people realizing this. And I think the evidence is pretty clear with all the research. 70% increase for smoking cessation from Johns Hopkins. And Stanford is studying our ibogaine 5-MeO-DMT protocol right now. Psilocybin is doing incredible things. And we're looking for a champion. We're looking for someone to represent the voice of our veterans, because I know this is not just a veteran thing. This is a human thing. And we all have been through our own traumas in our own way. But we need tools to do that. And we have a lot of them. I've spent the last 5 years helping my community of the SEAL teams and Special Forces veterans heal with psychedelics, but in conjunction with a lot of everything's focused on the nervous system, because the nervous system controls the mind and it controls the body and it touches everything. So if we can reset this through a medicine that happens to come from the ground, well, then we need to look there, because it's our. We just need to. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Thank you for your service, Tommy, and thank you for sharing your story. Do we have any questions? Representative Wigella.
I think one of the things that's so unique about this conversation is a lot of these results we're seeing after just one just one dosage, one time with a professional. When you think about how we treat mental health sometimes today, right, it's the use of antidepressant medication, which takes a really long time in some cases to actually come into effect, several weeks. Is that my understanding, that in a lot of these cases it's just one administration and then we see these massive improvements?
So each psychedelic compound and protocol has a unique design into itself. For what we're seeing in psilocybin, those protocols are calling for single dosing sessions with bookended by cognitive behavioral therapy before and after, as our friends at University of Michigan Health aptly described and shared with us. MDMA has several sessions, and so each compound has a unique way in which they are delivered. But what we're looking at and what we're seeing with our guys going overseas are settings like group therapy. These are guys that are feel safe in a group. They feel safe on a team. They feel safe in nature. How do we look at these types of alternative settings and group dynamics to integrate into the medical system in the United States, where the doctor-patient ratio that we're looking at currently through the FDA is 2 to 1, and so there's a lot that can be learned, and but funding is necessary for those types of that type of research to be done.
Can I add a quick follow-up? So just to kind of recap, we have the potentiality here to have a more effective, cost-reducing way to treat our veterans. We need the tools there to explore those options.
Absolutely, and my colleagues, Brett, our executive director, Brett Waters at Reason for Hope, and Lieutenant General Steele will speak to some of the more specifics around those cost reductions. But yes, we're looking at an intervention that is not only more effective, but more to the patient, but more cost effective for the long run to the medical system as a whole.
Rep. Stone.
Thank you. What type of training is there available, and how widely available is it for medical health practitioners? So we already have a shortage of providers, and then I am assuming that takes additional training.
That's a great question, Representative. So we're so excited about the efficacy of psychedelic medicine, but we see roadblocks in the system itself, and one of those is the availability of trained therapists. And how do we fix that? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do we wait until approval before allocating resources to training? Well, if we do that, we're going to have lines out the door of folks looking for psychedelic medicine. Or do we start now? Well, in the absence of clinical trials and the absence of approval, there isn't yet that natural constituency of patients who are ready and willing to go for clinicians to justify the cost of training more therapists. So what do we do? And we believe that this is an opportunity for state and federal stakeholders to get ahead of the problem by offering scholarships for providers to go through this training themselves so that we're ready. We have a workforce development problem, but really a workforce development opportunity. We've been speaking with many providers across the country. We're involved in just about every single state legislative effort to address the issues of infrastructure within psychedelic medicine, and training is top of the list. Thank you.
Thank you, and I believe you have other members of your team?
Yes, ma'am. With your leave, we'll make way for General
Yes.
Steele and Attorney Waters.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming today. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. This work is very personal for me. Reason for Hope was named in memory of my mom, Sherry Hope Waters, who I lost to suicide 5 years ago. It was my first year practicing law. That I had lost my grandfather, who was a veteran, to suicide when I was young. I have, personally experienced the, kind of current standards of care with SSRIs and the difficulties to move beyond them and the withdrawal symptoms, and have a lot of different perspectives that inform my work in this space and what motivates us to do it, including the work with so many veterans like Tommy who have been forced to leave the country and seen really remarkable results, and kind of seeing how we're losing all of this data and information on the outcomes and how this care should be delivered. Unfortunately, the legal system has really caused a lot of problems that are getting in the way of potentially this breakthrough progress. But I did just kind of want to note it from the outset. I'm happy to circle back to some of the questions that have been asked on the legal issues and give some additional insight on the difference between the medical versus legalization side. But the bottom line here is that through the medical model, the traditional model that people understand, where drug is going to get FDA approval and a psychiatrist will prescribe it. Right now we have MDMA has a breakthrough therapy designation for PTSD. It completed a second phase 3 trial. It is the company bringing that through, MAPS Public Benefit Corporation, is likely to seek FDA approval by submit its application in October of this year, I believe, and it's possible that by like the end of next year, this could be an available option. For psilocybin, it's actually 2 different companies that each have a breakthrough therapy designation. One for treatment-resistant depression, it's Compass Pathways. Another is the USONA Institute, that's for major depressive disorder, and those are synthetic versions. There's another company that was just approved for phase 2 for a botanical, like refined botanical product, but these aren't, just so everybody's clear, this isn't just like magic mushrooms that are going through clinical trials here. It's very difficult to be able to refine and get that FDA. The FDA likes to see those kind of isolated synthetic molecules that make it easier for them to study, which is why this is such a unique area of policy, and why it's creating a lot of confusion at the legal issue on the legal front. Because yes, psilocybin is something that's available in magic mushrooms, and it's pretty readily available throughout the United States as it is right now. So it's definitely going to be a complex system to regulate more broadly moving forward. But right now our focus is really on the medical model that we're discussing here, the need for research to be able to further study and ensure that there's broad insurance coverage, because this is going to be likely an expensive upfront cost to access through medical providers. As my colleague mentioned, the way MDMA is studied right now is either 2 or 3 sessions. Psilocybin is usually 1 or 2, and that comes with psychotherapy both before and after. So to ensure that this has sufficient data for robust insurance coverage is really important, and opening up that bottleneck of providers is really important, somewhere where the state really does need to step in, because we know right now that there is a shortage. The hope here is that people actually get better and are able to sort of get out of the system. And also what we're seeing are these amazing communities that are developing, particularly amongst the veterans, who are able to provide that peer support and help each other. And there are a lot of different models of care that I think are going to emerge over time, but the key, for especially early on through the medical model, like we need those trained providers, and it's going to require a lot of each of these compounds. While there are differences that are going to need to be studied for each, broadly speaking, a lot of the education and basic training is going to be similar. It's just a very different style of care. But we think that this really is the future of mental health care because of the transdiagnostic treatment potential we have here. It's not blunting symptoms and making problems potentially worse for some people in that way, that it's harder for psychotherapy to be effective because those emotions are blunted by SSRIs for many people. In this case, and not to mention that SSRIs are slow-acting medications, can take several weeks to 6 to 8 weeks for some people to see any effect. These are rapid-acting medications, so for suicide prevention in particular, that's really encouraging, because this is something that we know has an impact immediately, and that psychotherapy creates the opening that this kind of rapid effect and the sort of breaking of rigid patterns that the medicine provides is able to really help, so the psychotherapy is more effective. And yeah, it opens this kind of critical window for change. So again, there is work that has to be done, but this is really promising for, so many different conditions. Psilocybin being looked at for everything from, 2 breakthrough therapy designations for treatment-resistant and major depressive disorder, also really promising results for alcohol use disorder, smoking cessation, early promise shown for eating disorders and a variety of other conditions. So, we think it's really critical that we're getting infrastructure going here in Michigan, be able to get more research going, expanded access programs for people who have tried everything else already. This could be a really effective tool for a variety of mental health conditions and preventing suicides. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, General Steele, and happy to answer any questions after he speaks.
Madam Chair, members, it's a privilege and honor to be with you today. I live in Tampa, Florida, but I had a tour of duty in Detroit from 1978 through 81. My wife of 56 years wanted me to tell you all that our third child was born in Mount Clemens 42 years ago, and it was the best birth she had of all 3 children in the state of Michigan. So it's an honor to be back here in this magnificent location, and I believe that my purpose here today is, in closing, a reason for hope in the Veterans Mental Health Leadership Coalition is to urge you that I believe firmly that Michigan can be the nation's leader in the research and treatment protocols. With over 600,000 veterans in the state of Michigan and the suicide rates that are estimated conservatively at 176 a year in the state of Michigan, that we have an opportunity to do something to change all that because of you and the start of this process. And we need the resources and funding to be able to do that. And I believe that what you've heard this morning from the witnesses, including the University of Michigan and the people that have been before me today, it states the case. For me, my stepfather, I never knew my real father. My stepfather was a pilot shot down in World War II, was a prisoner of war in Stalag Luft 1 in Barth, Germany, and suffered immeasurably for the rest of his life from post-traumatic stress from his prisoner of war experience, which he never spoke about, as we all know that generation didn't speak about, except on my case, on my 18th birthday, that still resonates with me today, and I'm 76 years old today when he told me his story. I was commissioned the youngest officer in the Marine Corps, having enlisted in 1965, and went to Vietnam myself, and came back and was a leadership instructor teaching combat leadership. From my lived experiences in harm's way and what needed to be done in regards to preparing young men and now women to be able to go in harm's way and selflessly serve our country. I had 2 tours of combat in Vietnam and in the first Gulf War. My son just retired from the Marine Corps. He was an attack helicopter pilot, had 3 tours of combat in Afghanistan. So our whole family has been in this space and in dealing with the issues here. When I retired in 1999 as the Chief Operating Officer of the Marine Corps, I was at the University of South Florida in Tampa in the Office of Research and Innovation, looking at the comorbidities between traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, prosthetics, robotics, and what we were doing to assimilate young men and women into academia who had experienced the things that we're talking about here today. My role and responsibility as the executive director with military partnerships was to ensure the safety of the students and the faculty members along with those young men and women that were coming into the university to ensure they could assimilate in, matriculate, and be productive members of our society. In 2015 and 16, I was appointed to the Commission on Care during the Obama administration. Nancy Schlichting, who many of you probably know, was the head of Henry Ford Health at the time. She was the chair of our 15-member commission that looked at the future of VA healthcare. Our task was, because of the scandals, 22 a day at that particular time, the Phoenix, Arizona situation at the VA facility there of whether we should recommend the elimination of VA healthcare completely, transition it to the private sector, let it muddle through and see if it would come out the other side somehow, or to make bold recommendations in regards to the future of VA healthcare. We chose the last. We made 18 recommendations to the President and the Congress of the United States and the Secretary of the VA. 15 of them were bought, but they're all about innovation, stopping risk aversion, and getting into this space to looking at viable alternatives to SSRIs, as Brett said, drugs that do nothing but numb the problem, and look at the potential that this medicine, which has proven so effective, is brought into play. And the unconscionable nature that over 1,000 veterans have to go outside our country, those primarily who, in the 20-year global war on terror, after selflessly serving multiple tours of combat, 5, 6, 7 tours of combat to preserve our way of life in the greatest nation on earth, have to go outside this country to get the treatment to preserve their lives and their families' lives. So I believe that the state of Michigan, going back from 1978 to 81, the birth of my daughter, who has used these medicines, is 42 years old now, who is thinking about this today and knows that I'm appearing before you, believes that Michigan can, in fact, be the leader in all of this. We can get this done with your help. The funding, I think in your budget right now is about $1.5 million or $1.2 million or something. I personally don't believe with what the doctor from the University of Michigan indicated is adequate enough. I think it needs to be at least $5 million. I won't get into your budget process here, and that's your business, not mine. But the need is so overwhelming to step out of our traditional ways and think we're going to get a different result, because we're not. We're not going to fix this by doing the same thing over and over again. And I only wish that my father, my stepfather, could be here today knowing that we're trying to make a difference. So I'd be also honored to answer any of your questions and say that Reason for Hope and the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition, which consists of over 30 veteran organizations that bonded together, we will keep pounding the table and sending the message, just like Tommy's message, these powerful messages of hope on viable alternatives for treatment with this very special medicine that can change the world of mental health in our lifetimes. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, sir, for your service and your testimony. Thank you for the service of your family members, those who are with us and not with us any longer. Do we have any questions? Representative St. Germain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was born in Mount Clemens, too. I'm pretty sure I'm my mom's favorite. Just one quick question. Are there any known side effects with this medicine?
Yes, so the side effects, at least from a long-term perspective, are believed to be much rarer, milder than SSRIs. It can get a little bit confusing with the way that kind of adverse events and things are reported in clinical trials, like the hallucination itself for people on psilocybin can be, I think a lot of people consider that an adverse event when in fact it seems that that's actually, potentially a really important part of the process for people going through it is that subjective experience and actually helps lead to more beneficial results. So it can be a little bit confusing on that front, but certainly there are people who have had, not only challenging experiences during the sessions, but challenging experiences long term. People are, nothing is risk free, and this certainly isn't either. So we don't want to give, any sort of, false kind of belief that like it's works 100% of the time for everyone and there's no problems. There are certainly people who have had, longer term breakdowns. Again, it does like open up this really difficult emotions for people to face, and there have been, certainly people who have had, those kind of challenging experiences that have persisted longer term. But in terms of the kind of general side effects, it's often just described as like lightheadedness, nausea, dizziness during the experience, and things that subside. And generally speaking, the safety profile for these medicines is considered pretty strong compared to traditionally prescribed medications.
I would just add the therapy sessions that follow up and the sustainment of all of this, and the facilitators, the training that's required to ensure that we have that oversight to avoid those types of conditions that could result in a tragedy, are part of what this is all about. It's not just providing a dose of this critical medicine, but it is the oversight and the facility and the requirement that we have follow-up to ensure safety and security and stability. So I think that we're headed on the right path with our planning and intent to do that, but we need lots of people trained and lots of people that are in the space that understand the significance of these medicines.
Representative Bazat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your service, sir. Real quick comment, Rep. Stone, you reminded me that I kind of concentrate on, being a Vietnam veteran, I kind of concentrate on Vietnam, but there's World War II. We're at the era now losing a lot of our veterans, but we forget the Korean veterans. So we always have to include them in this conversation of PTSD and what they're dealing with. But I haven't heard of this before, but I'm in favor of anything that'll help our veterans deal with these issues, because they're real issues, as you have stated. When are the trials going to be done? My question: when are the trials going to be done, so we have information available to us?
Sure. So the trials for, at least in terms of like the drug development FDA approval process, the second phase 3 study for MDMA assisted therapy was recently completed. I think we're still waiting on the published data from that trial, but at least what has been reported thus far is that the results are very similar to the first phase 3 trial, which were, again, very impressive, with 67% no longer qualifying for PTSD diagnosis, and 88% experiencing a clinically significant reduction in symptoms. So if that, holds true, the FDA, the company will be seeking FDA approval at least by October, I believe, of this year is what's been reported, and it could be available, as a prescription treatment by the end of next year even. So this is, in kind of an immediate, urgent need to make sure that we start getting people in the state trained and, properly credentialed to be able to do this. For psilocybin, it is expected to be a couple of years after that. It's possible that alcohol use disorder could even get an approval before depression, but there are, the phase 3 is being planned for treatment-resistant major depressive disorder, alcohol use disorder, and it's expected probably at least a couple of years later, but there are some states that have, as have been discussed, some states that have moved forward with outside of the medical system, just legalizing what's often called supported adult use or psilocybin services, where people who won't necessarily need a diagnosis, but just get screened for potential contraindications and are able to access for any reason that they want in these facilities, and that again is not with the synthetic versions that are going through the FDA and have this clinical trial data. It is with a natural formulation, and there are regulations being put in place and are in Oregon, which are almost done, so they are getting ready to start actually providing services in Oregon shortly. Colorado is just starting its regulatory process, but it is, that's often kind of described more of like a wellness model. Where it gets tricky is that we know that veterans will be, and a lot of other people will probably be engaging in medical tourism and traveling to those places. Many of them will have severe conditions, and we hope that the people who are providing services are well trained to be able to handle those situations as they arise.
I just would like to again reinforce your comment, and just to make the relative of what we're doing here today. Those World War II vets and Korean War vets were my mentors in Vietnam, all of them. And they were addicted to alcohol, plain and simple. That was their escape route, because it was suck it up. because of whatever trauma they experienced in World War II and or Korea. And so Tommy will be the mentor of this next generation and current generation because of his lived experiences, because he's recovered because of these special medicines. And it's people like him that are going to make a difference. If we can just nurture this and get enough people that have experienced this in a way that we can stop this insanity of losing so many lives through suicide.
Representative Wigella.
I'll be very brief. Just want to provide a comment to the room and my colleagues. So I'm really passionate about this issue for a lot of reasons. I think veterans certainly, I have a family of veterans, but I'm also someone who lives with a chronic pain disorder called fibromyalgia. And people who live with fibromyalgia are 10 times more likely or 10 times more at risk for suicide. And medicines like this have shown to also help with chronic pain. So I think there's a lot of potentiality here. So my offer is just this simply, if anyone in the room wants to work on some policy or anyone on this committee, I would love to champion that with somebody. So.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for testifying today. I appreciate it. We have one more group to testify, but we're going to switch topics very briefly because Representative Rogers is here to testify on House Bill 4555 and needs to testify now because there's another appointment coming up.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. We have a couple testifiers on a time crunch, so I'm going to defer and then go second.
Chair Conlon and representatives, thank you. My name is Erica Hoover. I am the State Women Veterans Coordinator for our state of Michigan. I work at the Military and Veterans Affairs Department. And I'm here today to talk to you about House Bill 4555, Women Veterans Recognition Day, making it a permanent day in Michigan. Like I said, I'm a Navy veteran. I'm also a junior VP on the National Association for State Women Veteran Coordinators. This is something that we're all very passionate about, and I have a bit of a written statement, so I'm just going to read it to you. June 12th, it holds an immense historical significance for women veterans across the nation. On this day in 1948, the Women's Armed Forces Integration Act was signed into law, marking a pivotal moment in our country's military history. This legislation enabled women to serve as full and equal members of the United States Armed Forces, opening doors to countless opportunities and breaking down barriers for future generations of women in the military. Recognizing Women Veterans Recognition Day in Michigan would not only honor the courageous women who have served our nation, but also highlight the critical contributions they have made throughout history. It is crucial to acknowledge the unique challenges that women veterans face, particularly when it comes to their identification as veterans. Many women veterans do not readily identify themselves as veterans, often due to societal and cultural factors. The perception that veterans are primarily male can unintentionally exclude and marginalize women veterans, undermining their experiences and contributions. By designating a specific day to honor women veterans, we send a powerful message that their service is valued and their voices are heard. Michigan has a rich history of remarkable women who have served in the military. Let us not forget the inspiring stories of women like Colonel Ruby Bradley, a nurse from Spencer, Michigan, who served in World War II and the Korean War, caring for countless wounded soldiers and earning the distinction of being the most decorated woman in U.S. military history. We must also remember the brave women of Michigan Women's Army Corps during World War II who volunteered to serve and play a crucial role in supporting the war effort. Their contributions, though often overlooked, were vital to our nation's success. By establishing Women Veterans Recognition Day in Michigan, we demonstrate our commitment to preserving our state's rich military heritage and honor the extraordinary achievements of women veterans. This day serves as a platform to educate the public about the sacrifices, resilience, and accomplishments of our women veterans, empowering future generations to follow in their footsteps. And I highly encourage you to vote for this bill, and thank you for your attention and your consideration.
Again, thank you so much for our accommodating our time crunch. Thank you to Madam Chair, members of the committee, and today I am speaking in support of my bill, HB 4555, which would establish June 12 as Women Veterans Recognition Day in the state of Michigan. I'm going to kind of skip through. She did a great job with a little bit of the history. I do want to emphasize that prior to 1948, only women nurses could serve in the regular and reserve forces during peacetime. Women Veterans Day that we have, that we would like to establish is not a separate day for women veterans. It is merely a tribute to a groundbreaking day when women were finally acknowledged as essential to the war efforts and could serve in the regular armed forces as well as men. It is a day to celebrate women who have served in our military. I do also want to point out that 9 states or territories have a version of this recognition day in state statute, and 7 other states have introduced legislation to codify it into their statutes as well. It is important that we have days like this because many women are often overlooked and can feel invisible. In fact, just yesterday, I did have the opportunity to tour the Kalamazoo Armory in my county and view the construction that is underway to upgrade the women's bathroom facilities. They have 60 women serving in that facility with only 4 toilets and 2 showers, woefully inadequate. With our FY23 budget that we passed this last year, they will be able to add 5 showers and a lactation room for mothers. It's one example out of many that women in uniform and their needs are often overlooked. It's crucial that we help connect women to their identity as veterans and change our public perception. We must work to ensure that women veterans are treated with the respect and dignity they have earned and deserved, and I ask for your support on HB 4555. Thank you. And I do have a constituent from my district that would like to make brief remarks as well.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, Rep. Rogers. And would you like to bring up your constituent briefly?
Thank you, Madam Chair Conlon, Representative Rogers, and fellow veterans and committee members. My name is Tony Kennedy. I am a veteran from the United States Army. I served in the Army as well as in the reserves. Please forgive me, I'm just a little nervous. I worked as a medic and an orthopedic technician. I reside in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm married with a blended family and 3 children with 5 grandchildren. I'm here to support House Bill 4555 and ask that you do the same. For many generations, which you've heard, women have served in the American Revolution, the War of 1812, Civil War. We served in many capacities, not only cooking, laundry service, medical services, nursing, but also in fields of engineering and intelligence. By the end of World War II, more than 350,000 women veterans served overseas and at home. We women veterans have served in many capacities as well as other military opportunities. Harriet Tubman was the first woman to lead the troops into battle. That we have failed to recognize the important roles women have played in active engagements and support. It would be fitting to raise women vets to give our sons and daughters the recognition that everybody contributes to our defense. With the Army changing the name of Fort Benning, I just heard this the other day, to Fort Hal and Julia Moore. It is time to acknowledge the role both men and women have played in our military history. It is important that you understand that this is not a separate day for women veterans. It is a day to honor and recognize the contributions of our sisters before us and celebrate our service on the Women's Armed Forces Integration Act signed in 1948. This is a bipartisan effort. I mean, it really shouldn't matter. It really should not matter what political affiliation we have. We're all about the military. And the state of Michigan has done such an amazing effort in supporting our military with the Michigan Veterans Affairs agencies and the different opportunities for women. You know, I heard someone today say that sometimes we come home and we're just not really sure. When I came home, I didn't know I was a veteran. I just got out of the service. I learned 10 years ago that I made a difference too, and that I was a woman veteran. So all I'm asking you is to go ahead and support this effort. And I appreciate it, and thank you for indulging me in my nervousness.
You did a great job. Thank you for your service. Do we have any questions from any members? Okay, great. In that case, we will now be holding a vote on HB 4555. We need a motion to report House Bill 4555. Representative Coleman moves. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Conlon.
Yes.
Representatives Coleman.
Yes.
T. Carter.
Yes.
Stone.
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
Flagella.
Yes.
Markinen. Bazat.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
St. Germain.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, no nays, no pass, and the motion prevails.
House Bill 4555 is reported with recommendation. Now I'd like to bring up representatives from the Michigan Department of Military and Veterans Affairs and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. You may begin your testimony. We have enough time. 10 minutes. Sorry. I hope that's enough time. Thank you for being here today. You have the floor.
We'll be brief, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee, for hearing us today. I'm Robert Neer. I'm the Deputy Director with the Michigan Veteran Affairs Agency, a combat veteran from both Iraq and Afghanistan. So thank you. Like you had mentioned, Rep. Bazat, I had a Vietnam veteran be my mentor. So if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be here today. So I'm very blessed and thankful for the generational support and all of the support from the committee itself. I'm going to be really brief and just say that we're the central coordinating agency, as you know. We oversee and try to support everybody to provide services in the community. And with that, you've heard a lot of the community partners that we have over the past couple weeks. But with us today, we have another committee or another partnership with our sister organization, MDHHS. And I just want to say we are all in support, and Director Hollier, if he was here, he would say we are in support of anything that's increasing the amount of benefits and services for our veterans in our state. So we just want to say thank you once again, and I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Webb.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present members of the committee. My name is Brian Webb. I'm the Veteran Liaison for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Service. I'm the project lead over the Walking with Warriors Veteran Navigator Project. I'm also a Michigan Army National Guard chaplain. It's kind of fitting that we're here today. 7 years ago today, I was tasked with this project to the day. Looking at our mission and our vision and our values. And so our mission really is in the creation of this program, which is the only one of its kind in the nation. We comprehensively address veteran mental health and substance use disorders across the entire state through the existing structure that we have through the PIHP, which is the Prepaid Inpatient Health Plan, and the community mental health service providers across our great state. They're really the vehicle that makes this happen. And so 7 years ago, we began to embed what we call veteran navigators across the state as kind of frontline triage, people that are going to be there on a veteran's worst day to begin to address the needs that they have. So we want to identify veterans and military families that have not been previously identified. That was our number one mission. And when we look at the numbers in the state of Michigan, we look at 60% of our veterans that are VA eligible are not accessing their benefits. And so there's a lot of unidentified veterans and military families across our great state. And so then our vision was to advocate for those veteran families. And we'll see in a couple of slides on social determinants of health, where military service kind of leads you to being dependent upon where to go, what to do, how to do, and how fast to do it. So then our values are really, at the end of the day, to safeguard, respect, and encourage the behavioral well-being of veterans and the ongoing follow-up. You'll see the map of our prepaid inpatient health plan regions across the state of Michigan. And this is really a slide I really want to focus on. So we've got, on this team, there are 34 individuals, 10 prepaid regional veteran navigator positions full-time. There are 13 community mental health veteran navigators that cover 19 counties and 4 veteran peer support specialists. We have a faith-based program focused on moral injury. And then this third point, this initiation of our Thrive training, which is a resilient suicide prevention-centric approach. It came about as a result of a casualty notification that I did in 2018, where I began to realize how many parents of soldiers who had taken their own lives do not and and have not been trained in how to listen for the signs of suicide. And so we began to engage with different organizations. This is World Maker International and Thrive with Dr. Molly Marty, as well as with SAMHSA. The funding for our program currently comes half through the state of Michigan under the mental health and half from SAMHSA under our SUD, substance use disorders. We have ongoing robust relationships with all 5 of our veteran health administrations. We are very focused on connecting our veterans to their VA benefits. It is crucial that we remain advocates for this in this process. And so about 76% of our individuals we engage with, we are referring to the VA. So I think the key success of our program, since November of 16, we have seen over 25,000 veterans and military families, and we've had tragically only one suicide. It's off the data charts in the state and across the nation. And I think that comes from the fact that we don't have eligibility. We're public funded. So regardless of your characterization of discharge, regardless of your era, regardless of your different settings, you're going to be seen by our team. In FY22, we saw 3,846 veterans and military families were identified. As of March 31st of this year, we've already seen 3,927. We are at our capacity. We are in need of needing more individuals in the field meeting these needs and connecting our veterans and advocating for them. So some of the social determinants of health that I mentioned before, you can see the ones at the top. I think I want to look again at the military service one. We talked about transition earlier, heard that, the transition, how difficult it can be. So when we look at that, military service demands that somebody's always telling you where to go, when to go, how fast to go, when to stop going. And then when you transition out, you've got to do that for yourself now. And a lot of our veterans just lack those skills. So our veteran navigators have really filled that gap and become that advocate until our veterans and military families can begin to self-advocate once again. Just some of the demographics, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. These are numbers from FY22. I want to mention this slide right here. If you look at it, where the VA in many cases cannot meet the needs of other than honorable discharge and dishonorable, we in fact can as part of our program because of the beauty of being public funded. We can meet their needs and look at even increase in discharge characterizations in some cases. These are some of our veteran areas. And this is where most of our challenges are at. This is just FY22 numbers. With SUD, we heard about alcohol earlier. The military very strongly has a culture of alcohol, and so we have to work through that in many cases. Some of our veteran insurance coverages. So where we are referring our veterans. So you see 76% of our veterans are being referred to the VA. Only 40% of eligible veterans are accessing their VA benefits nationwide. And you know, Michigan is a National Guard reservist state. We have no federal posts here. So there's a lack of resources. But yet, many of those veterans don't meet the VA criteria being VA eligible. So our program really helps meet those needs of those veterans, getting them connected to essential resources in their community. Housing has become a very critical resource. 80% are being referred to housing. I want to focus on this slide really quickly. Since 2018, we began aggregating data. So what we do is we meet the veteran, we find out whether they're connected to the VA for service connection for disability. We've gone through that with hundreds of veterans. We've connected them, got them connected to their benefits through connecting them to a veteran service officer who's increased their service connection disability or gotten them a service connection disability when they didn't have one. Since 2018, that total's come to $19,283,216 that we've seen come in, federal dollars coming into the state of Michigan. So that helps to offset our costs here in our state. And most of that information currently is gathered directly from the veteran or the family member in really unofficial channels. And our veteran navigators, again, being in the field day after day, meeting the needs on the ground, like your frontline triage, have been able to affect all this work. Some of our survey results we ask at the end of our process with our veterans, two of our goals in this program, which are lower stigma and to lower suicidal ideation and suicide. And these are the results that we've had.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. I think it is important that we, as members of the legislature and the general public, have a better perspective of what is being done at the state level and what could be improved upon in the future. Thank you in particular for already helping nearly 4,000 families in this fiscal year alone. Do we have any questions? Okay. I would like to thank everyone again. This was quite an impactful set of hearings. I am fortunate to all who have spoken and to those who have served our country, and I know the committee members are ready to roll up our sleeves and start getting to work on this topic. Yet again, I mentioned a news article last week, and this week I was made aware of Navy Times, an article in Navy Times that discussed that basically the suicide prevention program has not been run properly by the Navy, so it's another indication we have a lot of work to do in this area. Okay, we need a motion to excuse Representative Markkinen from today's committee hearing. Representative Bazant moves. There being no objections, Representative Markkinen is excused. Seeing no further business before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.